Good Lord, look at that. These scenes are no longer in Atlanta.
Has caused the company irreparable harm. This is the Union's Post. It depicts a bulldozer ripping down the fence that separates the Gaza Strip and Israel. Hamas had broken through the fence earlier this month as part of its massacre of 1,400 Israelis. Most of those killed by the terrorists were civilians, including babies, women, and the elderly. The union, called Starbucks Workers United, wrote solidarity with Palestine at the top of the post. It has since been taken down.
Got that fist in
Starbucks
there
issued
too.
a statement saying that it unequivocally condemns the recent acts of terrorism and disagrees with the views expressed by the union. Starbucks is suing the union over its use of the Starbucks name and logo, which the company says has caused people to associate the post.
Palestinian protesters surrounded the building, and a large group of them made their way inside, where they're accused, at least, of disrupting the congressional vote for the Speaker of the House. Police had to arrest many of them in order to get them out of the building. The protesters were mainly pro-Palestinian. There was also a Jewish group against the state of Israel. A group of them remained outside while another entered the building and took over the Cannon Rotunda. As we can see in this video, in fact, police mainly allowed the protest to take place, at least at first. They stood in a circle around the main protest area while people chanted and clapped. Reports claim that police arrested 300 people, and video suggests there was at least some minor resistance. There were speakers at the protest outside as well. Among them was Representative Rashida Tlaib. She's a Palestinian. She's also with what's now being called the Hamas Caucus. She's a member also of the so-called Squad of Socialist-aligned representatives. And during her speech, she's accused of spreading terrorist disinformation in order to inflame the crowd.
Continue to watch people think it's okay to bomb a hospital where children... You know what's so hard sometimes is watching those videos and the people telling the kids don't cry. And like, let them cry. And they're shaking, and somebody noticed they keep telling them not to cry in Arabic.
Fake tears. Fake tears.
If we're not crying, something is wrong.
She then sent a message to President Joe Biden saying that not all Americans are with him on siding with Israel. And she told the protesters they are on the right side of history and that they were saving lives, and that to do that, she said, you do everything possible to save lives. Now, turns out, of course, that the narrative that Israel bombed the hospital in Gaza, well, it was fake. The story of an Israeli strike being peddled by most of the big corporate media who source the claims only from sources in Palestine. President Biden said that data collected by the Defense Department supports Israel's claims that it was not responsible for a deadly explosion at the Gaza hospital, in fact, in the parking lot. The bombing was allegedly from a misfired rocket launched by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is another terrorist group and a Hamas ally in Gaza. Now, in light of this, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene stated that she's going to call for the censure of Representative Tlaib, and Rep. Tlaib also refused, notably, to apologize for falsely claiming Israel was behind the bombing of the hospital in Gaza. And regardless of all that on the fake news about the Israeli strike in the hospital, it has sparked protests and riots globally. Pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel groups were marching in the thousands in many countries. And many of them, they marched on the U.S. embassies. And the protest in Washington, with Tlaib and others leading the way, those were taken as an extension of the global protests, which in some cases turned violent. Now, it seems there were security concerns in Washington as well. Matthew Foldy, a political reporter with Spectator, posted a security alert allegedly from Willie McFarland, the House Sergeant at Arms. The alert warned of a potential for civil disturbances, and it was sent to all members and staff of the House of Representatives. After the protest yesterday, many conservatives noted the glaring similarities to the protests and riots on January 6th. While it could be argued, notably, that the protesters in this case, they didn't break windows, they didn't seem to get in fights with police. Many of the people in prison for January 6th, well, many of them did not fight with police or cause violence or break things either. In fact, most of the J6ers, what were they charged with? Well, they were charged with disrupting an official proceeding, parading, and trespassing. And that's also what the leftist protesters just did. In fact, all three of those. There are now calls for equal justice under the law. You know, the system of justice America is supposed to have, but most of it is being done tongue-in-cheek because, well, many people do not believe that it will happen. And the reason, and in fact the reason why they're probably right, is something that should concern everybody. A lot of people no longer believe we have equal justice under the law. There's a perception that we have a two-tiered justice system, a weaponized legal system where conservatives are treated with a system of zero tolerance and often even overstepping that with what looks like outright political prosecutions, and where people on the other side, people on the left, are given broad forgiveness and leniency, even sometimes for very serious crimes. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene posted a video of the protest, and she stated, there's an insurrection happening now in Capitol Hill. Watch.
Okay, so we have an insurrection happening in the Cannon building. This is the march outside, the pro-Palestinian march going on outside.
Now, in the video, which was over 14 minutes long, the protesters were also heard shouting at the representative. The main Capitol building can be seen behind them as well. Watch. After this, she issued a formal request to the Capitol Police to preserve all video surveillance footage, photographic evidence, police reports, and arrest records from all House office buildings that day. Now, in the office letter, she states that it was an insurrection. She writes, by launching an insurrection in the Capitol complex, these actors caused elevators to be shut down, staircases and hallways to be blocked, exits to be made inaccessible, and official legislative business to be obstructed, putting members of Congress, their staff, and political visitors at risk. Notably, the obstruction of an official proceeding charges right there. And she calls for investigations and prosecutions as well. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene notes as well that among the group that organized the protest was Jewish Voice for Peace. That group is defined by the Anti-Defamation League as a radical anti-Israel activist group that advocates for a complete economic, cultural, and academic boycott of the state of Israel. Now, in the broader context of this, the United States is having a debate on the integrity, or lack thereof, of its justice system. President Donald Trump has been campaigning on the narrative that there is a two-tiered system of justice. The Biden administration, the Justice Department, they deny this. On the recent so-called insurrection, though, while many conservative commentators said this was an assault on the Capitol, many on the left shot back, noting, well, it was a different building technically. Technically, it was the Cannon House office building, often called the Cannon House office building. It's just a few minutes walk from the main Capitol building. Now, this building is actually part of the Capitol complex. It's on the Capitol grounds, and it's connected to the main building through the Cannon tunnels. It's also one of the 4 buildings used by members of the U.S. House of Representatives for their offices. And in the same way that we were told on January 6th that members of Congress had to hide in their offices, well, the same could be argued here. Also keep in mind that the Cannon building was one of the 2 that were evacuated on January 6th. The other was the Biden. The message in the recent protest was clear, though. It was directed at members of the House. And keep in mind the context of this from yesterday. House members held their vote for the next speaker. We could argue that the protest did not technically stop that from happening. But we could also argue that the Jan 6 protests and riots also did not stop Congress and former Vice President Mike Pence from counting the Electoral College votes and then announcing Joe Biden as president. So we will see what happens with this. Will we see any criminal charges in this case? Will we see charges for trespassing, parading, and disrupting an official proceeding? Well, we'll have to wait and see. It all depends on our justice system. Now, in other news, the vote for the next Speaker of the House is still ongoing. We're taking a look at the United Nations agency as well, specifically dedicated to Palestinian refugees. All of this after the break.
It's all that wasteful spending that the Democrats, Joe Biden, is doing. It's going to keep inflation high.